Hello, Year 4, and welcome to day 21 of our home learning. It is Monday, the 8th of February 2021. I've put my email address there in case you all need to get in touch with me. Now, there's a little bit of a change today. Not necessarily all of you, but a couple. You will get a text message from school if you need to look at a different reading part. Okay? So when it comes to reading, there will be a different reading video on. If you are doing the Firework Maker's Daughter, then you just stick with this video, okay? If you go to the other video, then you will need to come back and do the last part, okay? Okay, so let's get started, shall we? So, early morning work. What you need to do is, for number one, write the inverse calculation. Now, what does inverse mean? It means the opposite. So what's the calculation method there? It is multiplication. So what is the opposite of multiplying? Yeah, it's dividing. And what number always comes first in the division sums? Number two, complete the part whole model. So 65 divided by 5 equals, and it's got 60 divided by 5 is 12, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. So add those two answers together, and that gives you your complete answer. Number 3, divide the number represented by 4. So work out how many you have, and then divide that by 4. True or false? 360 divided by 6 is 60. You've got to work that out. And Alfie is calculating 30 multiplied by 11 is the same as 990 divided by 3. Do you agree with Alfie and explain your reasoning? So pause the video now and see if you can do that for me. Right, number 1. Write the inverse calculations. So I've got, it's the largest number first because it's division, remember. So 516 divided by 43 equals 12. Or 516 divided by 12 equals 43. Complete the part whole model. 65 divided by 5, and 65 is partitioned into 60 and 5. So 60 divided by 5 is 12, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. So 12 add 1 is 13. Number 3. Divide the number represented by 4. So the number I had that was represented was 440. I know that 400 divided by 4 is 100. And I know that 40 divided by 4 is 10. 110 is 110. True or false? 360 divided by 6 is 60. It is true because I know that 6 lots of 6 sixes are 36. So 6 lots of 60 is 360. Alfie, number 5. Alfie is calculating 30 multiplied by 11 is the same as 990 divided by 3. So I did 30 multiplied by 11 is 330. 990 divided by 3 is 330. So he is correct. Okay, so English. Some of you have got some things on paper that you need to be getting on with, and most of you are working with me doing this. Okay then, so let's see. You need your copy of chapter 5, and you were asked to keep this out of last week's work, so I hope you have. So let's get reading. A chat with old Wrinkly. The next morning, Hiccup checked the dragon under his bed. It was still asleep. When his mother, Valderrama, asked him at breakfast, "How did initiation go yesterday, dear? Hiccup said. Oh, it was fine. I caught my dragon. That's nice, dear, Valarama replied vaguely. Vaguely? What does that mean? It means if you don't give lots of detail. Stoic the Vast looked up briefly from his bowl and boomed, "Excellent! Excellent!" before getting back to the important task of shoveling food into his mouth. After breakfast, Hiccup went to sit on the front step because his grandfather, who was smoking a pipe, beside his grandfather, who was smoking a pipe. It was a beautiful, cold, clear winter's morning, and not a breath of wind, and the sea all around as flat as glass. Old Wrinkly blew out smoke rings contentedly as he watched the sun coming up. Hiccup shivered and chucked stones into the bracken. Neither of them spoke for a long time. At last Hiccup said, "I got that dragon. I said you would, didn't I?" replied Old Wrinkly, very pleased with himself. Old Wrinkly had taken up soothsaying in his old age, mostly unsuccessfully. Looking into the future is a complicated business, so he was particularly pleased that he'd got this right. "Something extraordinary, you said?" complained Hiccup. "A truly unusual dragon, you said? An animal that would really make me stand out in the crowd?" "Absolutely," agreed Old Wrinkly. The entails were undeniable. "The only extraordinary thing about this dragon," continued Hiccup, "is how extraordinarily small it is, in that it is super unusual. I'm even more of a laughing stock than ever." "Oh dear," said Old Wrinkly, chuckling in a wheezy way over his pipe. Hiccup looked at him reproachfully. Old Wrinkly hurriedly turned the laugh into a cough. "Size is all relative," Hiccup said. Old Wrinkly. "All of these dragons are super small compared to a real sea dragon. A real sea dragon is 50 times as big as that little creature. A real sea dragon from the bottom of the ocean can swallow 10 large Viking ships in one gulp and not even notice. A real sea dragon is a cruel, careless mystery, like the mighty ocean itself. One moment calm as a scallop, the next raging like an octopus." "Well, here on Berk," said Hiccup, "where we haven't any sea dragons to compare anything with, my dragon is just considerably smaller than everybody else's. You are getting off the point." "Am I?" asked Old Wrinkly. "The point is, I just don't see how I am ever going to become a hero," said Hiccup gloomily. "I am the least heroic boy in the whole hooligan tribe." "Oh, pshaw! This ridiculous tribe," fumed Old Wrinkly. "Okay, so you are not what we call a born hero. You're not big and tough and charismatic like Snotlout, but you're just going to have to work at it. You're going to have to learn how to be a hero the hard way." "Anyway," said Old Wrinkly, "it might be just what this tribe needs, a change in leadership style, because the thing is, times are changing. We can't get away with being bigger and more violent than everybody else anymore. Imagination, that's what they need, and what you've got. A hero of the future is going to have to be clever and cunning, not just a big lump with overdeveloped muscles. He's going to have to stop everyone quarrelling among themselves and get them to face the enemy together." Right, I want you to read up to the end of chapter 5 all by yourselves, please. Thank you. So pause the video now until you've done that. So tomorrow we are going to write the conversation between Old Wrinkly and Hiccup that you have just read. So to do that, we need to recap inverted commas. So can anyone remember inverted commas is the posh name for them? What are they? Yeah, they're called. you might have learned them as speech marks, or you might know them as speech marks, but we really now need to be using the proper posh words, so inverted commas. And when are they used? Yeah, they're used for really you wrap them around the speech to show that someone is talking. Okay, so we're going to recap on all of the rules and things like that. Okay, so let's get moving. So we're going to be learning about inverted commas. So inverted commas, also known as speech marks, they're used to show when someone is speaking. And although it may look complicated, by following just a few simple rules, you can become an expert at punctuating direct speech. Now, remember, direct speech, it's when you are talking to each other. So we're going to be learning the rules for direct speech. So you place the inverted commas around the words which are spoken. So the words which are coming out of someone's mouth. After the inverted comma, you use a capital letter at the start of a speech sentence, even if it's in the middle of another sentence. And before you close your inverted commas, you use a comma, a question mark, or an exclamation mark to separate what was said from the speaker. And if a new person speaks, you use a new line. So, here we have our minions. I'm going to show you some examples. Should we tell the humans we can speak English? Asked Stuart. Okay, so if you have a look there, in this, you've got your opening inverted comma, your opening speech mark, with a capital S for should, because that is the beginning of the speech. You then have a question mark because it is a question, and that goes inside of your closing inverted comma. And the speech, the word that tells you that someone's speaking is asked Stuart. Now that hasn't got a capital letter, okay? Kevin replied, no, definitely not. So then we have, it would be a new line, and it would say Kevin replied, and between that saying who's talking and the speech you put a comma. So you have a comma, then an opening speech mark, and then a capital N for no, and at the end of the speech, what is coming out of Kevin's mouth, he has a full stop and then a closing speech mark. And I think I've said all of that. Okay, let's have a look at the next example. I'll race you there, said Isla. There you can see at the beginning of this what's coming out of Isla's mouth. I'll race you there. It is opening inverted comma, then a capital I for Isle. And at the end, you've got an exclamation mark, plus your inverted commas, and you've got a small letter for the word said. You'll win then, murmured Emery. You're much faster than I am. Now this one's slightly different. It starts exactly the same, an opening inverted comma with a capital letter. You'll win then, with a comma and inverted commas, murmured Emery. And there you have another comma. You're much faster than I am doesn't have a capital letter because it is the same sentence as you'll win then. Okay? It's not at the beginning of the speech sentence. Okay, so let's have a look at the first one. Okay, can you punctuate the speech in these sentences correctly? So let's have a look at the next one. Who's talking? Yeah, Zoe. And what is Zoe saying? What time are we going out? So what do we need to have in front of what? We need to have our inverted comma. What time are we going out? So what kind of punctuation do you need after the word out? You're right, it is a question. So it needs a question mark and then inverted commas. Let's see if you are right. Excellent. I wondered if you can copy those two sentences down with today's date and your target, punctuate and direct speech, and see if you can do those. So pause the video now, please. Okay, so let's have a look at Yasmin shouted, look out. So who's talking? Yasmin. How is she talking? She's shouting. And what's coming out of her mouth? Look out. So this is how I would have punctuated it. Yasmin shouted. Remember, Yasmin has a capital letter. Shouted, a comma to separate who's talking and the speech sentence. And look out is in your inverted commas. Look has a capital letter, and I have put an exclamation because they're shouting. Besides, said Sam thoughtfully, what was she doing there anyway? So who's talking? Sam said thoughtfully. And what's he said? Besides. So I would have my opening inverted commas, a comma, my closing inverted commas. I would have a comma after thoughtfully, and then I would open my inverted commas again, but I would not have a capital letter for what, because it is still part of the besides sentence. What was she doing there anyway? I would have a question mark and my closing inverted commas. Let's see if I'm right. I sure am. Okay, so I want you to pause this video now. Remember the rules, okay? Remember, different line for different people speaking, and I would like you to copy that out. Well, I would like you to write that out, and I would like you to use the correct punctuation for our direct speech. Remember, opening speech mark, capital letters, commas, exclamation marks, question marks, closing speech marks, new person speaking, new line. Okay, so pause the video now. Okay, so you've done that. Let's see how well you have done. Right, it looks a completely different piece of text, doesn't it? So, did you eat the last donut? Hannah asked her little brother. Hannah has a capital letter not because it's next to the inverted commas, but because it's someone's name. No. So we have someone else talking, so it's a new line. No, I had carrot sticks for my snack, replied Zack innocently. Then where, questioned Hannah, did the sugar all around your mouth come from? Did you get that one right? Because remember, the question, Hannah, is put into the middle of your speech sentence. Smiling mischievously, Zack responded. Oh, and we have a comma there after responded. I'm not sure, but it definitely wasn't from your donut. And that is in our inverted commas because that is how Zack has responded. Right, let's carry on. So we're going to look at the reporting clause. So a reporting clause is when direct speech will almost always need a reporting clause. And the reporting clause tells the reader who the speaker is and how they spoke. So whether they shouted or they questioned. Okay, so it could be Blake, bellowed. It could be Isla whispered. It could be Amina questioned. Okay? Or questioned Amina. Could be either way. So, for example, I came first, shouted Frank excitedly. So what is the reported clause? Remember, I came first is your direct speech. So the reported clause is shouted Frank excitedly. So a reporting clause can come before, after, or it can split the direct speech. So we have before, Dan asked hungrily, and then after the reporting clause, you have a comma. Do you know what time lunch is? Afterwards, if the reporting clause comes afterwards, you would write it like this. Do you know what time is Do you know what time lunch is? Dan asked hungrily. If it's embedded, that means that it's in the middle of your speech sentence. Do you know, comma, inverted commas, Dan asked hungrily, comma, inverted commas, what time lunch is. Now remember, it doesn't have a capital letter because if you can take Dan asked hungrily out and the sentence would still make sense. Right? This makes your speech more interesting. So, your reporting clause. I've done one for you. I think we should hide upstairs, whispered Darcy quietly. Okay, if the reporting clause, what is the reporting clause? Whispered Darcy quietly. If it went before, how would you write that sentence? If it was in the middle, how would you write that sentence? So pause the video now and have a go. Okay, so at the beginning, I would write Darcy whispered quietly, comma, I think we should hide upstairs, full stop. If it was at the embedded, if it was in the middle, I would put inverted comma, I think, comma, inverted comma, Darcy whispered quietly, comma, inverted commas, we should hide upstairs, full stop, inverted commas. There I have lots and lots of synonyms for said. Okay, so different ways of saying said because it gets so boring. So we've got mimicked, lectured, directed, announced, admitted, agreed, advised, affirmed. Okay, what I would like you to do is I would like you to think of some sentences that you could write using some of those synonyms for said, putting your reported clause in the beginning, the middle, and the end. It can be about anything. Okay? So pause the video now. I've already spoke about how if you repeat the word said, it gets boring. You've got lots of words now that you can use for said. Okay, maths. Let's move on to maths. Okay, so our maths lesson, if you remember what we have been learning about, let's do a quick recap. Okay, so Joe is trying to measure the area of the top of his table. He has chosen to use paper plates. Do you think this is a good idea? No. And we've already said that the best way to do would be to use something either would be a square, wouldn't it? Because then it would fill up every bit of space in in the on the table. Yeah, because you can see the paper plates. Really, you can see that there's lots of space there. Okay, so how many squares cover the surface of the shape below? So what you need to do is you need to have a think and estimate how many of those yellow squares fit into that shape. Have you had a good estimate? Let's see. So you can see that it has been divided and sectioned off, and we have 11 squares. Right, now what I would like you to do now is to have a think. How many do you think is in A? How many do you think is in B? And how many of those blue squares would fit into C? Have a go. And then it's saying, can you order these shapes from the smallest area to the largest area? So pause the video now while you have a good think. Okay, so I've divided it, and you can see that the shape with the smallest area is A, then C, and then B. Brilliant. Did you get it right? We've also looked at comparing the area using the symbols less than, more than, or the same. So have a look at the two shapes that you have. Have a look at the blue square. How many of those squares do you think fits into the first shape and the second? And then see which of those symbols that you would need to use. Okay, so I thought it would be 9 squares and the second shape being 10 squares. So we have 9 squares is smaller than the 10 squared shape. Now it's your turn to complete the worksheet that you have with Mun on the top. So pause the video now, please. Brilliant. Okay, rating workshop. Some of you will go to the other video, while most of you will stay on this one. So if you are doing the Firework Maker's Daughter, you need to complete this work here. Okay, so in your packs, you have a character sheet. And what we're going to do is you're going to use the text and we'll find out about the characters. So we will begin together. So although yours is white, this is what the character sheet looks like. So, what character could we choose? I'm going to choose Lila. Facts we know. I know that she's determined to be a real firework maker. And what I'd like to know more about is how she's going to get the missing ingredient. Okay. Then another character could be Chulak. And what do you know about him? He is Lila's friend, isn't he? Yes, and he's also works for the king to look after Hamlet the White Elephant. What I'd like to know more about is how his friendship might develop, or do they remain friends? Let's see if you can complete that sheet for me. Now pause the video now. Okay, so in our history topic, we've been learning about the Romans and why was the Roman army so successful. So let's see what we're going to be doing today. So the Roman army. The brilliance of the Roman army was the key to Rome's success in building its empire. Now, if you can remember the maps that we did, where it showed no countries were taken over by the Romans, and then the colours, it got more and more that they took over and they invaded the many countries. So by the end of the lesson, you should know what kind of person joined the Roman army, how the soldiers spent their time when not fighting, and why the army was so successful. Okay, so that will be by the end of this, either today or tomorrow. So what was the army like to begin with? As the Roman power grew, more people were made to join the army. Why do you think they were made to join the army? Because they wanted to invade more countries and they wanted to be more powerful. At first, the soldiers were the better off citizens. So why did you have to be well off? They copied Greek armies and fought on foot with long spears, and they were sent home when a war ended. So how do you think the growth of the empire affected the following? How do you think the growth of the empire affected who joined? Do you think it was only the better off people, the people who had the most money? What about the poorer people? Were they able to join the army? How they were equipped? So what equipment did they have? And how the army was run? I think they may have chosen to allow other people to join the army rather than just the better off citizens, because they would have needed more soldiers to help. Remember when they first came to Britain and the Celts were able to fight them off because they weren't as strong. And it wasn't until later they came back and they had more of an army. They had more legions, they had more people. So how did things change? As the empire grew bigger and bigger, the army had to fight further and further away from home. Being a soldier became a full-time job. They were no longer sent home when a battle ended. These full-time soldiers were well trained and disciplined, so they knew what they had to do. They got on with their job. They did things the right way. They had to be tough and confident in the use of a number of weapons. Okay, so instead of going home after they won a battle, they had to stay with their army. And that was because more than likely the battles were further and further away from where they lived originally. And also because they didn't know what was going to happen, they needed to take over the land. So how was the army organized? So Roman soldiers were grouped into large numbers called legions. There were between 29 and 30 of these at different times. Each legion was divided into 10 cohorts of 480 men. So a legion was divided into 10 cohorts, and one cohort was 480 men. So each cohort was then divided into 6 centuries of about 80 men, and they were led by a centurion. And then each century was split into 10 groups of 8 men who shared a tent or a barrack room. What a lot of people. So there you can see a bit of a pictorial way okay, on the side. So you have got the legions, and there were between 29 and 30 of the legions. A legion was then divided into 10 cohorts of 480 men. Okay, so one cohort had 480 men. The cohorts were then divided into 6 centuries of about 80 men, and they were led by a centurion. Each century was split into 10 groups of 8 men who then shared a tent or a barrack room, which is just a room where the soldiers slept. Each legion had a golden eagle carried on a pole. Each century had its own standard or flag. To lose your standard, or worse, the eagle, would bring great shame on the soldiers concerned. This is why a trusted, experienced soldier was given the role of a standard bearer, and they would carry the pole with the flag and the eagle on the top. And each of the flags for each of the legion was different. Now the person who had the pole was the most trusted and experienced soldier that they had, because they needed to be trusted, because you didn't want to lose the eagle, right? Because then it would bring shame on you. So how did you become a legionary? The legions were made up of male Roman citizens, so people who lived in Italy. To join the army had to be recommended by someone in the army. So you needed someone who was already in the army, needed to say, I think this person would be really good to join our Roman army because they are fit and healthy, and they are of good character, so they would be trustworthy, they would be confident, they would be strong. So the person who was recruited, the person who wanted to go in the army, had to be at least 20 years old. In our army, you have to be 18. If you signed up to be a Roman soldier, you had to join up for 25 years. So if they joined when they were 20, what would be the first year in which they could leave? Yeah, 45. Whilst these people were in the army, they weren't allowed to marry, and were only allowed to marry once they had left. So when they were retired, when they left the army, they were given money, and this was 3 gold coins. They were also given land so that they could farm the land. The Legion also contained specialists such as engineers, surveyors, doctors, vets, stonemasons, craftsmen, and even torturers and executioners. Now I wonder what all those jobs are. An engineer. What does an engineer do now? A surveyor? What does a surveyor do now? Maybe you could look those up, because I will ask you tomorrow. Right, what if you weren't a Roman citizen? If you were not a citizen of the Roman Empire, but you wanted to join the army, you could do so as an auxiliary, and they were made citizens when they retired. Okay, so if you weren't a Roman citizen, you could still join the army, but you couldn't be a legionary, you had to be an auxiliary. And after your 25 years were up, when you retired, you were then made a Roman citizen because you were part of the Roman army. Now, if you, very quite dark, but this picture shows a citizen document giving Roman citizenship to a soldier named Gemellus. Okay, now it's just so that you can see. So when they left the army, they were given a document, something like what's on the picture there, and that told the person that they were now a Roman citizen. Okay, so there we have a Roman legionary's uniform. So you have someone who's carrying a spear, who has got a shield, they've got a sword, they've got daggers. What's covering their chest and their shoulders and their head? Well, they've got a metal helmet on their head. Why do you think the helmet was made from metal? Yeah, to protect their head so that nothing would go through. Brilliant. They were on their torso, which is their shoulders and their chest and their stomach, they were covered with body armour, and that was made again from metal. Why? The same reason. They had a woolen tunic underneath. They had sandals. Look at the shield. So why do you think the uniform and equipment was so effective? It was because it gave good protection. They had lots of weapons. What weapons can you see? You can see a javelin. You can see a dagger. You can see a sword. Yeah? And basically a shield as well, although a shield would protect them because they would lift it up in front of their bodies, but they could also hurt someone with their shield. Yeah? Their clothing is effective because of what it's made from. Yeah? And also the helmet. So in your pack you have a diagram of a Roman soldier. Can you label the diagram? And then I would like you to begin to design your own Roman shield. And there you have some examples on this page. Okay? So well done. Try and do some independent reading and times table rock stars. I'll see you tomorrow. And then why don't you try and get some exercise or help out at home? Okay? I know it's really horrible with all the bad weather, but I'm sure you can do something. Okay? See you tomorrow. Have a good go. Brilliant. Well done.